Rob Reiner and Billy Crystal were never just close friends. Their bond was forged through years of shared work, shared laughter, and shared silence. Moments so personal that words were often unnecessary. They had stood beside each other through joy and through sorrow, trusting one another completely. But on the night of December 14, 2025, that lifelong connection was pushed into a nightmare no friendship should ever have to endure. When Billy learned that Rob and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, had been killed, his body nearly gave way beneath him. Overcome with shock, he rushed toward the Brentwood home, his emotions spiraling beyond control. Standing outside the house that had once been filled with warmth, creativity, and celebration, Billy broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. What had once been a place of cherished memories was now hollow, silent, and steeped in grief. Yet the tragedy did not stop with the murders themselves. Hollywood was shaken even further when Billy, still reeling from the loss, made the shocking decision to speak out publicly. In a phone call to Rolling Stone, his voice trembling with fury and pain, he exposed secrets that had long remained buried. He spoke of an incomplete will and a disturbing scheme allegedly involving the couple's son, a plan centered on seizing control of the family's assets. Billy knew these details intimately. What he revealed that night peeled back a layer of darkness surrounding the Reiner family, one the public had never seen before. Earlier that same evening, as the first reports of the killings began to surface, Billy had been at home with his wife, Janice. The phone rang relentlessly, unanswered again and again, until finally a close friend got through. His voice shook as he said, "Billy, something terrible has happened to Rob and Michelle." Billy stood frozen, unable to process the words. "What?" he repeated over and over, his mind refusing to accept the reality. When he heard the word Brentwood, the phone slipped from his trembling hands. Janice, standing nearby, saw the color drain from his face. Fighting back tears, she asked what was wrong, but for long moments neither of them could speak. Billy sank onto the couch, folding forward, burying his face in his hands as if trying to shut out the horror rushing into his thoughts. Images flooded his mind. That same house, just months earlier, alive with laughter during a small gathering celebrating Spinal Tap 2. Now, it had become the site of a savage crime. Janice wrapped her arms around him, her own tears falling as she whispered in disbelief, "No, it can't be Rob and Michelle." As more information emerged, the weight of the tragedy grew heavier still. Authorities confirmed that both Rob and Michelle had suffered multiple fatal stab wounds. The LAPD Homicide Division immediately sealed off the Brentwood neighborhood, launching a full-scale investigation into what was now considered an exceptionally brutal and serious case. For Billy Crystal, the loss was not only public, not only shocking, it was deeply personal, marking the darkest moment in a friendship that had once been defined by laughter and trust. The realization that a home once overflowing with laughter had been reduced to a place of devastation made Billy feel as though the ground beneath him had completely given way. He and Janice could not remain where they were. Without hesitation, they drove straight to Brentwood, where South Chadbourne Avenue had already been sealed off by yellow police tape, surrounded by the relentless flashing of red and blue lights from dozens of police vehicles. The moment Billy Crystal stepped out of the car, the transformation in him was unmistakable. The man long known for his gentle smile and sharp wit now appeared as though years had been carved into his face in a single night. His skin was ashen, his eyes red and swollen, and every step he took seemed weighed down by an invisible but overwhelming burden. Tears slipped silently down his cheeks, his grief raw and impossible to conceal. Standing before the house, Billy seemed unable to speak. His head bowed, his hands shaking, his eyes fixed on the interior of the home where the voices, laughter, and warmth of the Reiner family once lived. The atmosphere was unbearably heavy, disturbed only by the sound of footsteps echoing through the street. Each second stretched painfully long, cutting into Billy's heart until he finally collapsed into uncontrollable sobs, overcome by the cruelty of what his closest friend had been made to endure. Janice Crystal remained at his side, holding his hand tightly, wiping away her tears again and again. Neither of them addressed the press gathered nearby. Instead, they quietly placed a small bouquet of white flowers near the fence, an unspoken goodbye to a life taken far too suddenly and far too brutally. For the entire time he stood there, Billy could not bring himself to look away from the mansion. It was as if he were trying to preserve every last image of Rob and Michelle in his memory. Every tear, every trembling breath testified to a friendship that ran deep, to a loss that words could never fully capture. He stayed in silence for a long while, until Janice gently rested her hand on his shoulder, offering comfort and slowly guiding him away from the scene that had left everyone present consumed by sorrow. Yet soon after, the story took an unforeseen and unsettling turn. Hollywood was rocked once again by revelations that surfaced in the aftermath. Rob Reiner, it emerged, had secretly reached out to the press, not to discuss his career or unfinished work, but to reveal a grave secret. The nature of it was so disturbing that it sent chills through all who learned of it. The disclosure sparked intense speculation. What had compelled Rob to come forward just before it was too late? Why had he chosen that moment to speak? As news of the deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner spread across the evening of December 14, 2025, Billy Crystal found himself unable to remain silent any longer. The truth, whatever it was beginning to demand to be heard. Billy Crystal was the one who reached out to Rolling Stone himself. His voice shook, yet carried a firm resolve, as if he had no choice but to release the pain before it completely consumed him. Under the dim yellow light of the room, long shadows stretched across the floor, mirroring the weight pressing down on his body. Every breath felt heavy, every movement exhausting. His heart ached as horrifying images replayed endlessly in his mind. Billy sank back onto the sofa, lowering his head and burying his face in his hands, desperately trying to shut out the memory of that familiar house in Brentwood. A place where, only months earlier, they had laughed together while celebrating Spinal Tap 2. That same home had now become the scene of a savage murder. Janice stood beside him, tears streaming down her face as she whispered through her sobs, "It can't be! It can't be Rob and Michelle!" In that moment, grief and rage collided inside Billy. His hand tightened around the phone as his body trembled. "No," he said sharply, his voice shaking but his eyes burning with fury. "This wasn't random. Rob trusted me," Billy continued. "He told me things about his will, about the people he wanted to protect. And now everything has been destroyed." He paused, struggling to steady himself before going on. He was scared. He said it himself. Scared because there was a child who had hurt him too many times. Suddenly, Billy jumped to his feet and began pacing the room, each step pounding like a blow to his chest. The pain was so intense it felt as though he might collapse. "I know who could be behind this," he said, his voice trembling but edged with grim certainty. "It's Rob's son. That very son. The one he loved and trusted with all his heart," Billy went on, his jaw tightening, "only for him to betray him." He bit down hard on his lip, his eyes bloodshot, his hands clenched into fists. How can a son be so cruel? How can anyone do something like this? When questioned further, Billy made no effort to hide the fury burning inside him. "Rob told me everything," he said, his voice rising. "He changed his will again and again just to protect his other children. He was afraid that his addicted child would destroy everything. And now look what happened, right there in that house, with a kitchen knife." He emphasized every word with painful precision. "I can't believe someone from within the family could do this to Rob and Michelle. They loved their children unconditionally. Especially that child, the one who once lived on the streets. Rob even made being Charlie to save him, to pull him back from the edge." Yet the anger inside Billy surged like an uncontrollable fire. He stood again, wandering aimlessly across the room, each step echoing with the pounding of his heart. "I don't want to believe it," he said quietly. "But the truth is already too cruel. If Rob's son really did this, then that family will never be whole again. And I swear, I will not let this be buried in silence." Billy collapsed back onto the sofa, staring into empty space, his voice trembling yet unyielding. Rob was an extraordinary human being. He deserved peace, not to leave this world carrying such disgrace. His hands clenched tightly as hatred surged through him. "I will not forgive," he said. "I will never forgive whoever did this." In the final moments of the interview, Billy choked back tears. "I've lost the closest brother I've ever had," he said. "Not only Rob, but Michelle too, the sister Janice and I loved so deeply. They were murdered inside the house filled with our shared memories. I will not forgive. Never." He ended the call in broken sobs, leaving behind a crushing silence on the other end of the line. Billy Crystal's grief-stricken and furious words, spoken only hours after the tragedy, sent shockwaves through Hollywood. They were not merely the cries of a man who had lost a friend, but the raw anguish of someone whose world had been shattered beyond repair. Through his words, Billy was also subtly pointing toward a possibility too disturbing to openly name, that the person responsible might be someone from within Rob's own family. A son who had once battled addiction, a child for whom Rob had sacrificed so much in an effort to save. Though Billy's accusations were charged with anger, they were rooted in deep love for his fallen friend and an unbearable sense of outrage at a betrayal that could never be justified. The short but explosive interview was quickly published by Rolling Stone, instantly becoming the first and most powerful statement from someone intimately close to the victims. It ignited suspicions that had previously existed only as quiet whispers. With a heart shattered by grief and anger still burning fiercely within him, Billy Crystal chose to speak, not for attention, but to defend the legacy of Rob Reiner, the man he had loved as a brother for nearly 50 years. As news of Rob Reiner's death spread, the shock rippled far beyond Hollywood. Millions of fans around the world were plunged into grief. Across platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, people flooded timelines with photographs, iconic scenes, and unforgettable moments from the films he directed. Many messages ended with trembling words, "R.I.P. Rob Reiner. A legend has left us." These posts were more than simple farewells. They were memories, powerful reminders of how deeply Reiner's work had shaped lives. From the first time audiences watched Stand By Me, to the laughter and tears shared through The Princess Bride and When Harry Met Sally, social media became saturated with sorrow. The collective grief was heavy, almost suffocating. Countless fans wrote about crying in movie theaters while watching his films, only to feel that pain magnified now by the realization that the master storyteller was gone forever. One post read, "It feels like my entire childhood has just been torn apart. Rob Reiner wasn't just a director. He was part of the most beautiful memories of my life." Messages like this spread rapidly, connecting strangers through a shared and aching loss. Alongside the mourning, anger began to rise, especially as rumors surrounding the circumstances of Rob's death surfaced. Reports suggesting possible involvement by his own son left many people stunned and horrified. "How can a family turn pain into a crime?" one fan wrote. "A man who brought joy to millions shouldn't end like this." Comment sections overflowed with disbelief, rage, and heartbreak, crashing together like relentless waves. Fans began lighting virtual candles in tribute. The hashtag Remembering Reiner spread quickly, filled with images ranging from on-set moments to rare behind-the-scenes photos. The messages were simple, yet deeply moving. "You taught us how to love, how to laugh, and how to cry through cinema." This was not only mourning for a man, it was gratitude for a lifetime of storytelling that left an indelible mark on the world. And the reaction did not stop with fans. It swept through the acting community, filmmakers, and everyone who had ever worked alongside Rob Reiner. Jerry O'Connell, who appeared in several of Reiner's projects, shared a particularly emotional message. "It feels like I've lost a father. The world will never be the same again." Words like these deepened the collective sorrow and inspired many others to share personal stories, testimonies of how Rob Reiner had touched their lives in ways that were intimate, meaningful, and impossible to forget. The friendship between Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner stretched across decades, weathering years filled with laughter as well as moments soaked in tears. They stood together during life's brightest celebrations and remained side by side when confronted with its deepest wounds. For many, one question has always lingered: how did such an extraordinary bond begin? Was it fate, a shared creative project, or simply a small, unremarkable moment that quietly sparked a lifelong connection? For nearly 50 years, Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner walked the same path through the world of cinema, a place where careers, creativity, and companionship blended into a bond that was both rare and enduring. Their story began in the 1970s, when Billy Crystal appeared in an episode of All in the Family, the groundbreaking series that had already made Rob Reiner a household name. From their very first encounter, there was an immediate sense of familiarity. They were more than co-workers brought together by circumstance. They were kindred spirits, united by a shared love of humor, storytelling, and the simple joy found in everyday creative moments. At the time, Billy was still a young actor, newly arrived in Los Angeles. He had been cast as the best friend of Meathead, the character played by Rob. After only a handful of scenes together, the two found themselves laughing uncontrollably. When the director finally called "Cut," Billy turned to Rob and joked, "If we're this good together on screen, why don't we make it official in real life?" Rob laughed, clapped him on the shoulder, and replied, "Deal. From now on, we're brothers." That casual exchange marked the beginning of a friendship that would last nearly half a century. Before long, Billy and Rob became one of Hollywood's most recognizable and close-knit duos. When Billy moved permanently to Los Angeles, they spent countless evenings together, sharing dinners, watching baseball games, and trading jokes late into the night. Billy often described Rob as sharp, witty, and unfailingly punctual. Rob, in turn, saw Billy as his greatest source of emotional support, especially during the painful period surrounding his first divorce. Together, they experienced every rise and fall of life, professional disappointments, creative breakthroughs, and the profound joy of welcoming children into their families. As Rob gradually shifted his focus toward directing, Billy remained the trusted confidant, the friend with whom he shared ideas, tested characters, and worked through creative doubts. The character of Harry Burns was shaped largely around Rob's own personality, a man emerging from divorce, cautious about love, and guarded by experience. Many of the film's most memorable lines were born directly from real conversations between the two friends. Initially, Rob hesitated to cast Billy in the lead role. He worried that if the film failed, it could strain, or even damage, their friendship. That hesitation itself revealed how deeply their bond mattered to him. Their relationship was never just about work. It was built on loyalty, trust, and a brotherhood that had grown stronger with time. Billy, however, spoke to him with complete certainty. "If we don't make this together," he said, "then who would we ever make it with?" That single sentence dissolved Rob's doubts. The result was a romantic classic that would go on to define an entire genre. During the first test screening, the two of them sat side by side in the very back row, so tense that they held hands from the opening scene to the final frame. When the lights finally came on and the theater erupted in endless applause, Rob leaned toward Billy and whispered, "See, we really did something special." Billy smiled, his eyes filled with emotion, and answered softly, "Not me, us." That exchange became one of the most treasured memories they ever shared. Their collaboration did not end there. Billy later transformed into the unforgettable Miracle Max in The Princess Bride, while the two of them laughed uncontrollably on the set of This Is Spinal Tap. Beyond their professional lives, they roasted each other at Friars Club events, watched Dodgers games together, and were always the first to call whenever one of them had something to celebrate. Rob once said, "Billy was the best friend of my life." Billy, in return, often called Rob the brother I chose for myself. Their bond extended far beyond the screen. They stood together through every rise and fall of their careers, supporting one another through success, disappointment, and reinvention. Crystal appeared in projects like This Is Spinal Tap and The Princess Bride, where the blend of their talents created moments that were both hilariously comedic and unexpectedly emotional. Scenes that filled not only audiences, but the creators themselves, with pride. Trust and mutual respect were the foundation of their friendship, carrying them through every challenge. In their personal lives, they shared simple joys, family dinners, casual gatherings with friends, and long nights filled with laughter and ordinary stories. Crystal once said, "We didn't need to talk much. Just one look, and we knew exactly what the other was thinking." That silent understanding was rare in Hollywood, a place where pressure and fame often fracture even the strongest relationships. As the years passed, they watched each other grow, find partners, raise families, and endure personal upheavals. Billy stood by Rob during difficult periods in his marriages and later witnessed his renewed happiness when Rob met Michelle Singer and found peace once more. Despite demanding schedules and separate projects, they remained in constant contact, sharing ideas, offering support, and reminding each other of what truly mattered in both art and life. Crystal often said that Rob helped him understand acting on a deeper level, teaching him that humor was not just about getting laughs, but about revealing something profoundly human. Few people realize how deeply connected Billy Crystal and his wife, Janice, were to the Brentwood home of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer. Over nearly 50 years of friendship, Billy had been welcomed into that house countless times. It was the place where they often spent relaxed weekend afternoons, laughing together around a long dining table, watching test screenings in Rob's beloved private theater, or sitting by the pool reminiscing about Dodgers games and shared memories from years past. That mansion was far more than a residence. To Billy, it felt like a second home, a place where he experienced the same warmth and sense of peace he felt in his own. He still remembered the intimate dinners Michelle lovingly prepared, and the long nights when he and Rob sat in the living room, passionately arguing over new scripts, while Janice and Michelle talked quietly nearby, wine glasses in hand. Each time Billy prepared to leave, he would joke, "I'll be back soon, don't let me get too homesick." Rob would laugh and respond with an affectionate pat on his shoulder. Over time, Brentwood became more than just an address. It came to symbolize a bond built on trust and affection, a place where happiness and sorrow were shared freely, without the need for words. That was why, when the devastating news finally arrived, Billy felt completely unmoored. For a few long seconds, he stood frozen, his eyes wide yet vacant, the color drained from his face. Janice gently rested her hand on his shoulder, as if trying to absorb some of the crushing weight of his grief. Neither of them could comprehend how a home once filled with laughter, love, and ordinary moments had become the silent backdrop to the most horrific tragedy of Rob's life.